I'm John Kemper. I don't know, most of you have met. Imagine this, right after we held an election on Tuesday, we're starting to campaign again. Everybody goes, for what? Nobody realizes it. Yeah, I know we do, but
already.
People on the street look at you like, wasn't the election Tuesday? Aren't you a little late?
It's 7:30 on Tuesday.
So, 2011 is going to be interesting. There's only 3 governor races in the state, or in the United States. Louisiana, which has got Jindal, who, you know, he's probably going to be reelected. Got Haley Barbour in Mississippi, and you got Steve Beshear in Kentucky. So I think we're going to have, if you're a political junkie, you're going to have to come to one of those 3 states, I think, if you want some political action. So hopefully the media is going to be here watching this race and seeing what Kentucky does, looking towards 2012. So we're running for state auditor, and everybody wants to know if I can come check your bank account. I said, no, I can't check your bank account, but I can check government agency bank accounts and efficiencies in government agencies, IT audits, performance audits. And everybody wants to know if I'm a CPA. No, I'm not a CPA. You don't have to be a CPA to run for state auditor. And I think we've only had 1 CPA in like 35 years. So basically it's an administrative management position of in-house auditors and outside contracts with independent auditing firms. We're going to run on one real big issue, and that's a debt-free Kentucky. We've got $10 billion worth of debt just laying around out there that we have to repay. And we've got $20 billion worth of unfunded pensions in 4 state pensions, which that's going to be our undoing, because as these folks retire, those payments start, and we don't have the revenue. And I hate to even use the word revenue. Does anybody have a better word for taxation? You know, for the money that comes in. It's not revenue because they're not doing anything to produce
Theft.
Theft. Loot. There you go. But funds. Yeah, funds.
Money no longer in the economy.
Yeah, it comes out. But if we don't get Kentucky debt-free, I think we're getting ready to start seeing the federalization of the states. California's probably going to be the first one after the folks they elected on Tuesday. They're going to continue to want that free stuff. The state doesn't have the money. The federal government's going to give them the funds until they can't print anymore, and then they're going to own the state of California. I just assume they not own the state of Kentucky. Obamacare, prime example of 10% of our budget comes from the federal government. The other 90% is funded by state taxpayers. That 10% comes with strings attached to it, and it does control the other 90% of how we spend things. If everybody old enough to remember the 70s when they told us you'd lose your state highway funds if you didn't reduce your speed limit to 55. That's one of those things. That's one of those things that doesn't feel real painful, but it wasn't something anybody liked to do. Another prime example is my wife was an early start teacher when we got married, and it's an at-risk program federally funded for kids like ages 5 before they hit kindergarten. She's about 5'4" and 100 pounds. Her teaching assistant was the same size, and federal law mandated that if we took that money in the school system, these 2 had to go into housing project places first responders wouldn't go without police escort, and send them in there. I called the superintendent and I said, how long do you think before something happens to some of these women? And that's happening all over the state because there are these programs in most of the schools. He said, well, we have to do that to get the federal money. So we're putting our citizens at risk to get federal money, and you think about what a drug dealer does to you. He gives you a few samples until he gets you hooked, and then once you're hooked, he says, oh, by the way, that's going to cost you. Well, they're after our state sovereignty. Obamacare, if we're debt-free, we can say, no, thank you, we don't need that money. We'll figure out another way to do that program, but we won't participate. But if they're funding everything, plugging holes in your budget, what are you going to say to them? Okay, we'll do that. So I'd like for Kentucky to be the first state that's debt-free so we can stand against the federal government. You know, we were started as individual states with an overarching federal government, and we should have been 50 experimental states doing different things. Well, the federal government's dictating everything. So if their idea fails, all 50 states fail. Where if 50 states are doing 50 different programs, one state fails, you say, well, I know we don't want to do that. These guys are successful. Let's see if that works for us. But the federal government is taking such control of the states, we don't have that opportunity. So as state auditor, we're going to look at the waste and fraud and inefficiencies in government. And back in '92, Ben Chandler, use him as an example since he's one of my best friends, not. Found $900 million worth of waste and fraud and inefficiency in '92. So, if you bring that up into today's dollars, it's over $1 billion worth of waste and fraud. So that gets rid of part of our annual deficit, and we start plugging away at that $10 billion debt and funding the pensions. We get the unions, teachers unions and the state worker unions off the back of the governor, and maybe he can do some things that will actually help the people of Kentucky rather than fighting battles with legislature over budget deficits and this quasi-balanced budget deal where we just increase what we project our revenue to be to cover whatever we want to write a check for. Well, that doesn't work at home, so we know it's not going to work in Frankfurt. So what we're going to do is try to get in there, shrink government, make it less intrusive, do all the things we talked about doing during the congressional campaign, cut the spending, find the waste, and keep our tax dollars. The other thing we're hoping is that if we can get a good conservative governor who will look hard at the state tax code, we can make Kentucky really business friendly. We get debt-free, businesses will want to come here. Our credit rating goes up. Our cost of borrowing money, if we need to, goes down. All those things improve. So we're going to start now talking to people. We've been out. Christy's our campaign manager, trying to get me in places that I haven't been outside the 16 counties. So we've got 120 counties that we've got to get to, which ought to be interesting. So we're going to need help with anybody who values fiscal responsibility and would like to see the state of Kentucky stand against the federal government on some of these programs. So I'm not a fan of the federal government. Don't trust them. So I've got a website, johntKemper.com. I've got business cards in my pocket if anybody wants some of those. Oh, yes, we do have a press conference. Thank you. Wednesday, November 10th, in the Capitol Rotunda at 11 o'clock, we're going to be announcing that we're running and have a reception down at the LPKY headquarters. You guys can bring yourselves to come in that building. We'll eat some food together and get to know each other and hang out for a little while. And then we'll be off and running. Does anybody have any questions?
What time is that?
11 on the 10th, a week from today.
John, is anybody else declared in the race?
Adam Edelin on the Democrat side, former chief of staff for Governor Beshear. Everything I've heard is that he's a really nasty political operative, and everybody says it's going to be fun. I said, oh, well. And I'm sure, if you know much about Kentucky politics, you remember what happened to Ernie Fletcher when Stumbo went after him, and Crit helped with that. He spent 4 years fighting off lawsuits and didn't really do anything for the state of Kentucky. You see Sarah Palin, where she stepped down. I wondered if she'd looked down in history and said, well, you remember what happened to Ernie Fletcher when he tried to fight the Attorney General, spent 4 years fighting lawsuits. So hopefully we can get a conservative governor and a conservative AG that'll sue on behalf of states, fight off the federal government. We can work on paying down the debt and getting this debt-free so we don't have to deal with the federal government on funding of things we need done. But no Republican yet. But we expect one, don't we?
I was just going to ask if you expect it.
There have been a couple names batted around, but one of them I don't think is going to, and the other one, who knows?
One that's not going to is that DT?
Yes, Damon. Yeah. The other one is is Linda Greenwell, who ran against Crit twice. And I talked to her, and she said she wasn't going to run, but things may change depending on how this governor's race lines up. So we'll just deal with that when it comes. So if you want help, we'd like to have that. And if we agree on things, we can work together. And if we don't agree on things, we hold up signs, don't we? Does anybody have any other questions about me or?
I'm on the national scale. I'm really concerned about the unconstitutionality of a lot of things the government does. And I'm not an expert on the Kentucky Constitution, but I know they do a couple of things that we'd like to see, like one subject in the bill, which is not observed as much as it ought to be. But as the auditor, can't we look at some of these state programs that are being held hostage to a federal program and attack that on the basis that the federal program is not enumerated in the Constitution?
I would think you could. You know, it's going to take a conservative AG to do that. The auditor only really can make recommendations to agencies. Hopefully, we get a favorable relationship with the governor that's willing to take on some of that stuff. I think we don't downsize state government and get it fortified. You know, that's one of the things the founding fathers believed. If you wanted good federal government, you had to have strong state government to keep federal government in check. It only should be doing a few things for us. And right now, it's doing all those things it should be doing very poorly, and all those other things it's sticking its nose in, it's not supposed to be doing anyway. So I think we fight that on a state level. We won 9 governors races. I say hopefully conservative governors, fiscally conservative governors, won 9 races Tuesday. And I think those 50 governors are going to be the difference between how this country turns and how they respond to what the federal government tries to send to the states. I don't know if that answered your question, or if you even had a question other than a statement.
Well, I'm not sure either.
I know the state constitution is much thicker than the federal constitution, and there's some, I guess, more detail in there about what they can do and can't do.
Hey, John. Question about, for instance, a certain candidate in a different race who purchased some vehicles. Is that something that your office would be in charge of taking a look at, as far as do they actually need those vehicles, or that sort of thing? It's not just him. I mean, that's a common practice.
I think you can look at making recommendations and reports based on where the money's spent, how it's spent, whether it's a needed practice. Ideally, you hope you have a governor who's wanting to put together a slimmed down budget. And one of the things you would recommend is that you've got vehicles that run, maintain those, don't buy new ones. Let somebody else worry about the depreciation. We all know what happens to a vehicle once you drive it off the lot. Same thing for state vehicles. So any of that stuff we can get into and look at and make recommendations to. And one of the things that I know from talking to some people who've done some audits for the auditor's office is that as the independent auditor, they do press releases on their audits. But so many of those reports, much to their aggravation, turn into paperweights. They get passed on either to the AG's office or the governor's office, and it turns into a paperweight. Nobody really looks at it. I'd like to elevate the auditor's office where you do more reporting to the people, more explaining. The other thing is transparency. If all these audits were online, so you as a watchdog could go and look and say, well, look, the agriculture department is doing this. Why are they doing that? And everybody's got different interests and areas of expertise, and if people were watching those things, we wouldn't just have one auditor, we'd have a state full of auditors. And that tends to slow people down, especially if their main goal is re-election. They don't want to be caught with their, it's kind of like that, somebody's reaction to that. Well, it's a normal routine purchasing process that we've set up, well, maybe you need to change that process. There's not much the auditor's office can't get in. Our friend Wes Collins, what he was telling me was the judicial branch has put up a firewall between the auditor's office and them being able to get into the judicial branch, and we're going to look into that and see if that's actually the case and what can be done there. Because they spend a lot of money on that side. We look at $800 million worth of courthouses we just built in the state over the last 5 or 6 years.
800 million?
800 million. So, those kind of things, when you rack those up and stack them up, you cut down that deficit, $10 billion deficit pretty quick. It's almost $1 billion.
Yeah, my county's got a new Taj Mahal.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with the old ones if you go look at it.
I'm guessing there's interest on that?
Well, they're bonded.
Did they fund
They're
those?
bonds.
Yeah.
So,
To be fair, our courthouse kept getting flooded. They needed to move it, but they didn't need to build that.
well, I think we talked about that one day, didn't we? That you can operate in a building, a nice building that doesn't leak and has air conditioning and heat without having marble walls.
Yeah.